Hello and welcome along to another episode and another weekend review of the Tackling Sport podcast. It's Daniel Hussey here, once again joined by my brother Sean.
How's it going?
Yeah, Sean, another brilliant weekend of sport. It almost feels like there's so much clashes, like even Joanne Cantwell saying with the hurling actually clashing with the Late Late Toy Show. Like, so it's a different year, 2020, but I guess overall you're enjoying the amount of sport, albeit there's probably just a tad too much, is there?
Yeah, well, it's just everything seems to be clashing, and then with 4 o'clock hurling games and 4:30 football, which I think everyone was probably happy if they watched the hurling over the Chelsea Tottenham game. I went back and watched it last night, and it looked a really poor game. But I think the hurling, the All Ireland semi-finals weekend is traditionally probably the biggest weekend and one of the biggest weekends in the Irish sporting calendar, especially with hurling, because it's normally the four best teams go at it on back-to-back days. And you think of the hurling semi-finals we've got over the last couple of years, it's been unbelievable. You think of some of those Galway Tipperary games, for example, and I think they have that weekend has always had a place in the Irish sporting calendar, and this weekend in the hurling it didn't disappoint. And there's some really good games, but I think some unbelievable performances from people you'd expect. And I think, some of the skill that was on show just showed you why hurling is up there in terms of the best sports in the world at the moment, and to think that a country with a population of 6 million has this sport at our disposal, it's incredible, really.
Yeah, and so for the podcast, for those listening, if you want to go ahead to maybe 15, 20 minutes in, we'll focus on the Premier League, but I really want to start with the hurling, because I guess like a lot of people would be similar to, there'd be a kind of person, I'm trying to think of the typical person that would probably have chosen the hurling over Chelsea Spurs and would watch Premier League. I guess it's just the All-Ireland semi-final weekends and two pretty decent games. I thought the Waterford-Kilkenny game was obviously the better of the two. What did you make of Waterford's comeback? And it's just an unbelievable 2020 story. I think it was Nathan Murphy tweeted, if we end up with Mayo and Waterford as All-Ireland champions, it would just kind of sum up this year, I guess.
Yeah. I was so impressed with Waterford. Even in the first half, I know they had some bad wides, but I think when you do hit wides like that, I think it kind of shows you that you're getting in the right position. So it's nothing to do with your game plan or anything. It's probably just your composure and your, decision making at times. And there was a few wild shots from the likes of Gleeson and Bennett in that first half. And then it sort of all just clicked in the second half. And when you get the first couple of scores of the second half, I think that's crucial when you're, trying to attack a lead or try to attack a deficit. And I think it's so important to start well. And even if you just, get 3 or 4 points on the bounce and, you're within 3 and then Kilkenny have a little moment, you're still like in a good position. And I must say, their key players stood up big time. Your likes of Gleeson and Bennett and Kevin Moore and Tyke de Burke. I mean, it was a joy to watch now, because I think for us, growing up, we would have watched that Waterford team of the late 2000s, early 2010s with John Milan and Dan Shanahan and Ken McGrath and Prendergast and Owen Kelly. And, it was almost as if those guys who would have watched, them 4 or 5 players growing up, they sat at half time and said, let's make our own little bit of history. And, we know they got to the All-Ireland final a few years ago in the semi-final, but I think that performance was just pure magic, really. It was one of the best, Waterford performances we've seen, but I think it was one of the best second half performances we've seen in recent times, because they battered Kilkenny. And, Kilkenny had been kind of, just doing enough in the games. They just did enough against Dublin in that semi-final, and against Galway in the Leinster final they just found another gear in typical Kilkenny fashion. But they're just so heavily reliant on TJ Reid, and they're probably missing a forward or two. And I know Fenley came off the bench and Richie Hogan scored a couple of points, but I think you can't just rely on one man to do the scoring. And I think it probably caught out Kilkenny and Galway with Joe Canning over the weekend.
Yeah, it's amazing. And maybe touch on the sus Ishkas or the water breaks for a minute. I guess the Waterford in that third quarter got 111 to 4 points. And that was the winning of the game. An amazing turnaround to win by 10, considering a half time. And I think Kilkenny got the first score of the second half that you end up. So basically 111 to 3 for those last, whatever it is, 17 minutes. I guess those water breaks are massive. I know it was like a half time break this occasion, but it seems like games are now 4 quarters. I guess that'll be done in 2021, similar to the Premier League. And it's just a kind of lasting legacy for the coronavirus. But it feels like these games kind of take a life of their own. The clock gets stopped in the Sás Uisce, which for some reason I missed the first couple of games. I only noticed that there on Saturday for the first time. Didn't realize the clock actually stopped completely. And people are getting used to Sás Uisces, but it's almost like a game of 4 quarters now, isn't it?
I think they're better because I think it kind of breaks up the half. And I think,
Okay.
whereas teams in the past would have gone, right, let's just
Mm.
defend for the full 35 minutes. They might go, here, let's break it down. So let's defend first 15 minutes, get to the half or to the water break, and then really give them a lash at the second part of the first half. I actually think it adds to it. I think there's a little bit more to the games. I know that there's all sorts of stuff about whether they are good, but personally, I think
You,
it's a
you,
benefit.
Yeah, I take your point there, Sean. I guess I think the overall it'll obviously go back to halftime. It does seem to me that it ruins the flow of the game. Like we've been brought up as a game of two halves, and there's definitely a lot of data to back up the games turn completely on these water breaks. In a lot of the games, the scoring has kind of gone the other way. So it'll obviously go back to the halftime. But you're the first person I've kind of heard, and not favouring is probably the wrong word, but you seem to kind of enjoy the tactical aspect of it, even though there is no tactics given. But
I know. I do think it's look. Especially I think with the year, it had to be done with water, and
mm,
even the idea of a Mayor Ishka running on and giving up a water bottle to one player and to the marker then, is not a good look, especially with the times we're in. But I think it is. I think it's giving teams a chance to sort of break from that. If they're playing the defensive part and just up the gears, and it adds a little element because there's maybe especially in football, there can be a lull for minute 12 to about minute 20. And I think it just adds something whereas lads want to get the last score before the water break or they want to get the first score after the water break. And it kind of breaks it up slightly. And I personally think it's good. Now, whether I don't think it'll be a lasting thing. But personally, I think it's added a little bit to the games. And even it gave, I know Kilkenny were under the cosh, but it kind of gave them a little bit of a chance to get out of it and in turn try and make it like it would have made it a better game, because Kilkenny were able to try and get out of that rut and they got a few good scores. And, Galway were a little bit unlucky because they had the injury to Canning just after or just before the water break. So I think that kind of broke it up slightly, but I think it's added something this year that it's been different, and it's given teams the chance to sort of break from maybe a defensive element into a more offensive element or vice versa.
Let's get to a couple of the main talking points that we talked about here. So I want to get your opinion on what you made of Henry Shefflin's comments. And I don't kind of want to like throw the book at Henry because I think in the heat of the moment, you'll say stuff like you said about PC. I'd say if he had that back, he wouldn't have said that line specifically, but talk more about maybe his general. So I don't want to focus on that because it's just a throwaway comment, to be honest with you. And he's a legend of hurling, absolutely one of the best hurlers ever. But get a little bit on his kind of like insistence on the rules, and Joanne kind of called him up on it a couple of times on the rules, and he seemed to just refuse to believe it. Like going back to if anyone wants to listen to David Goff's interview, so where do referees want to go if he's actually going to back a referee's wrong decision here potentially based on the rule?
Well, the thing is, it's a hard decision for the ref to make because obviously the pace of play, and we know all about that, and especially in hurling with that extra pace, you have to again be 100% sure that is a red card, and it's the excessive force that's in the rule, or to deem it a strike in action. So the thing that yeah, I think you're right. I think there's a problem in hurling where there's the traditionalists of hurling, and I mentioned a Ben O'Connor interview with the Irish Independent where they grew up in the game where there was very little cards and there was no red or yellows, and if you got a yellow card it was almost frowned upon. And now they're kind of added a little bit more. There's a lot more yellow and red cards for specific fouls and repeated fouls. I think it's just a problem with that. Look, I thought it was a red myself, because it's you can't justify it by saying he was going for the hook because he was a good long way away, Garrod Hegarty, and to be honest, he was probably man of the match bar that instant. And I think he kind of just goes in with the intention of leaving a bit on Joe Canning because Joe's out near the sideline. He maybe wants to push him out over the sideline, or you could imagine if there was 82,000 in there, would have got a big roar if it was a late hit over the sideline, whether it was a free or not. And yeah, I can kind of get the idea that there mightn't necessarily been a bit enough force. And a few of my friends would have said there mightn't necessarily been enough force But I think if the linesman runs with the play to follow the ball and doesn't necessarily see the connection with it, and I think if he sees it, I think it is a red card. But I just with the view of the ref, and I think it's the kind of thing, like, God forbid, like, no one's advocating for it, but if there was a VAR in Gaelic games, which no one is advocating for, it would have been a red card.
And just on that, I was watching it going for a second, watching so much Premier League. I kind of went, well, he's going to get sent off for that when they look at that. And then I was like, oh, it's a completely different sport. I take your point. A quick thought on Henry Shefflin, just the general dismissive of the rules again, which is a line tag, a lazy line tagged out in the All-Ireland football final last year. Henry Shefflin himself in the All-Ireland hurling final. Completely, you disagreed with
Richie
the rule.
Hogan.
Like, Richie Hogan, which was farcical, to be honest with you. And the fact he's kind of still allowed to go on RT and kind of spout that kind of stuff. And again, I'm not talking about the PC thing. That's again heat of the moment stuff. But I think it's general. And in fairness, Joanne, there's only so much Joanne could do. She called him out a couple of times, which I don't think other RT presenters would, to be fair. But so no issues with her at all. But yeah, it just seems that, I don't know. Fair enough. Hurling's different. I get that. But knowing a referee hurling for the last few years and starting to play it a lot more recently, everyone knows the difference between a fair hit and someone that's really trying to hurt a player. And like these rules aren't brought in just so referees can feel great about it. They're brought in to protect the safety of the players, which is the most important thing. Like,
Yeah, and I think like because of the pace of the game, and the pace of the game has always increased, and you look at that, especially that Waterford game. I mean, the pace of Waterford's play was unbelievable, and the quickness and the slickness of the game is increasing. That hit where the game's a lot slower 10, 15 years ago when Henry's playing, and it probably doesn't cause Gerard Hegarty isn't coming in with less of a force, and it's less of a collision, if you like, of coming together, then I think you could probably make a case for a yellow card. But I think with just the way that the game is going in terms of the pace of it, you have to really be in control of yourself when you swing a hurl, and I don't think Gerard Hegarty was in control, and I think that's why. And look, I think the likes of Henry Shefflin and I know Michael Donoghue, the ex-Galway manager, he was saying it wasn't a red card. I get that because they're coming from a different sort of viewpoint on a different era, and it was interesting because Henry would have been targeted down over the years, and he deemed it not a yellow, and maybe he's just doubling down on his stance with Richie Hogan in the final last year. But I think no, that's the problem at the moment. There's a big difference between hurling, 5 years ago and now, or even 15, 20 years ago and now. And I think the rules, the ruling, I think everyone knows the rule, but I don't think everyone really gets the rule. And I think the inconsistency of certain refs and, look, I think James Owens, it's such a hard game to ref because of the pace, like we saying, but I think if he sees it or the linesman sees it or there's VAR, it's a red card. So I think that's the thing, but I'm not sure about whether the game is moving that quick for people to catch up with.
Yeah, well, obviously the linesman, like if the linesman had more authority, as in he was like an assistant referee, I think he'll watch for that late tackle as opposed to his one job is really just finding the picking which way the line ball, which is pretty kind of stupid having two linesmen doing that. But I'll give you an example. When I was assessed as a referee reffing a hurling game, and it was like a low end Dublin hurling league game, and someone came across and gave a dirty enough pull. Now, I as someone that hadn't played as much hurling as the next man, do you know what I mean? Like, and I'm kind of trying to learn a lot by just reffing it and played a little bit. I was like, hey, that's a dirty pull, that's a yellow. And afterwards was Seth saying it was a red card, and we went back and forth on it for a bit. But he was completely right, because your man had no intention of playing the ball, but went in with a dirty strike. And as a referee, you've got to put a stop to that. So I should have sent him off, saying that's not good enough. You cannot complain about that because it was a dirty strike. Completely different incident. But again, it's going back. The referees aren't trying to send lads off for the crack. These head injury, anything on the helmet red card rule doesn't come in so the referee can be the star of the show. It came in to protect the safety of the players, and obviously it shouldn't really matter. But that's Joe Canning there, and I think that was part of Henry's kind of point. Oh, it's Joe Canning. Why shouldn't you hit him off the sideline? But again, it just felt like it was because it's Joe Canning. Henry decided that he got hit, kind of thing, and it's old school. And I think there needs to be a bit more cop on, for want of a better description. On like RT's been watched by 500,000 people for those hurling semi-finals, so I think they have a bit more of a responsibility, to be honest with you, to have a bit more. And
I think what annoyed a few people was if I think Henry said, "Oh, I don't look at the rule book, or I don't care about the rule book," and I think that's filtered down into clubs. And then when a referee gives a decision in a club game in front of, I don't know, 500 people, Templemore or somewhere, then I think that's where it comes in. But personally, like, I got struck. We played a hurling game. I got struck across the body when there was no ball. I've seen people do it in the game. Like, it's a nasty thing to do. And I'm not saying Garrod Hegarty has no intention of playing the ball, but I think he has to be, if he is going for a hook or he is going to, shoulder him, I think he has to be really careful with that hurl. And I think that the fact that he comes in so far away from hooking him and hitting him across that lower part of the back, which is a sore part to get a hurl, I think it just wasn't a good look. But I have to say he was probably the best hurler on the pitch. Otherwise, him and Joe.
Yeah. And I think, in fairness to referees, they are clamping down a lot more on that. And I don't think that's appreciated enough, again, by RT and a few other analysis. Quick word on Joe Canning and his amazing sideline cuts. I was telling you off air when he was getting like the fourth one over, I go, maybe it's just becoming easier to do this. I genuinely was thinking maybe. And instead of me doing the research, Madeleine Clark in the Irish Times had a great article this morning when he said Joe Canning's had 27 championship sideline cuts, and the next closest is 8 for a Clare player in the 1980s. And the closest players playing at the moment is Austin Gleeson, and I can't remember the other one, who have 5 each.
Probably TJ Reid, is it?
And it's not TJ Reid, no. It's I'll get the name in a sec while you chat here. But like Joe Canning got 4 in one game. The next closest is 5. Like, this is absolutely ridiculous. He had 7 in the last month alone. It's just like his wrists must be like, I can't even begin to describe how amazing those 4 sideline cuts. And just a point, I saw someone tweet about this in the first half. We should have had the behind camera for the live for those 3. We had to look at the umpires instead of look at the ball for those 3 sideline cuts. Do you know what I mean? They had a back camera there right behind Joe Canning. Why didn't they just use that as a live feed? As a bit of something, because it's great seeing like that 4th sideline cut look better than the other 3, where there was one that was definitely better, but we didn't get a good angle of it, to be honest with you. So
he just keeps doing it, and the consistency of it. And he probably went through a lull there around 2014, 15, 16, where there was talks of, will Galway ever win an All-Ireland, and will Joe Canning ever win an All-Ireland? And he was getting in this now, while Patrick Horgan's in this bracket of probably the best player to not win an All-Ireland, and he was one of the most famous hurlers in the country. And then when he got his All-Ireland, and he just continues to amaze every time you see him, his free taking and his point scoring, and he's so important to Galway. He's probably too important, they're too reliant on him. I know they've Cooney and Whelan, and they just never really got into the game as much as Joe Canning. But when you have a player like Joe Canning, you're always in the game. Same with TJ Reid. You'll give yourself a chance come the last 10, 15 minutes. And he was brilliant, and you kind of expect him to do it. But like you said, All-Ireland semi-final in Croke Park. I mean, one of the widest pitches in the country as well, and he's hitting them over with 25, 30 yards to spare on some of them. It's it's brilliant.
I have that hurler, Tipperary hurler. If you won't guess.
Recently,
wing forward,
wing forward. John McGrath.
No, Noel McGrath.
Oh, Noel McGrath.
Yeah, I don't recall him hitting one over, but he's had 5 in total since the championship. Quick word on the 26 players, and that's been brought in that they're going to allow the 36 players to the All-Ireland finals, which I think the GA wrote to the government. I think overall, I think they probably got that right, because it was more of an GA needs to be seen that they weren't pushing that straight away. But for All-Ireland finals, I think that's acceptable. And as I think it was a Brendan Cummins on the Sunday game saying, just put them in the top tier wherever, just have them there. And I think that is important. I know it's a tough situation. Obviously, there's a bigger picture outside of this that we don't want to get too into. But yeah, a good move, I think, overall. Yeah, I think Davy Fitz and Brendan Cummins got the line right there. They weren't giving out about it. I just think they were saying going forward for the All-Ireland finals instead of giving out about it, which I thought was presented very well. Although that obviously didn't make a difference, because.
But I think it should be the same as well for the FAI final there in a couple of weeks between Rovers and Dundalk. And I think that there's a lot of push for getting 5 or 8 family members per player. Like, I'm not too sure about that, because
I disagree with that, to be honest with you.
Yeah,
I think
I think it's just a little bit. I think they've gone so far without it. But I think, look, whatever happens, in fairness, you have to commend the FEI, the GA, the IRFU, and the safety of these games has been unbelievable. Every game and every training county has gone through pretty swiftly, bar Sligo, which is the only in the men's football has been the only exception. But the FEI and the Electricity League has ran through pretty cleanly after a couple of bliffs, and the same with the GA, and it's brilliant to just, like you say, have these games and have 2 All-Ireland hurling semi-finals this weekend and 2 FAI football semi-finals.
It's been amazing. Very amazing few weeks of the GA in general, and it's important not to forget about the FAI as well. We're going to move on to Premier League, Sean. That's it for the hurling. We've a couple of talking points then from the weekend. Firstly, this 5 subs thing. So I think now I've gone complete circle on. I was completely against 3 subs. It gives the bigger clubs too much. Sorry, completely against 5 subs. It gives the bigger clubs too much subs. I don't know. I've kind of gone full circle. All of Europe is 5 subs. So why does Premier League have this given right to not have 5 subs when everyone else is doing it? Secondly, Klopp's point, I'm pretty kind of convinced on him when he says, well, what will be my next 2 subs? They'd be take Robertson off and bring another left back in, you know what I mean? And look after when they have those players getting the red zone. I think for the upside of, saving a few injuries, I don't think it's a massive thing. And at the end of the day, all of Europe's doing this, but you're dead against this, and you really want the 3 subs to stay in.
Yeah, I wouldn't say I think it should stay. I think I'm not a big fan of changing rules halfway through a season and, all this, because, say, for example, Sheffield United away to Arsenal might have said, oh, if we had an extra 2 subs, we would have brought on this, or Liverpool away at Brighton said, if we had an extra 2 subs, I know Brighton scored late, but we would have brought on blah, blah, blah. Look, I think that the reason that the Premier League, I think there's the gulf in class in squad depth between top and bottom, I think is unparamount to most leagues in the world, especially in Europe. You take League One, I mean, bar the likes of PSG, who are, this multi-millionaire, and they've got all these players. But I think between the rest of the 13, 14 teams, there isn't a huge division. Same with the Bundesliga, that, the top 1 or 2 clubs. And the difference in the Premier League, it's the top 6 or 7 clubs. So, I mean, this idea that you're not going to be playing Liverpool or City every week, but you could be playing an Arsenal or a Tottenham or a Chelsea, who have, 50 million pound players on the bench. You've got Pulisic for Chelsea. You've got Giroud, players like this, Jorginho, guys that can change a game if they needed to. What I had an eye on it over the weekend in the Championship, because the EFL has gone to 5 teams, and what you find in the Championship is,
or 5 subs, you mean? Yeah.
Sorry, 5 subs. Yeah. What you find is that the top sides don't necessarily make 5 subs. So you think of Bournemouth, who are probably one of the favourites to go up, and if not win the Championship. They haven't used the 5 subs. They've kind of gone for 2 or 3 at times. The reason is, if you look at their bench, it's like the players that they have on the pitch, they've nothing on the bench compared to it. They have a lot of young players, guys that are unrecognised. I think they got your man Raquelme from Atletico on a loan. And I just, that's the difference, I think, of the EFL. Like, I mean, teams that are more rounded in their squad use the 5 subs. So there's a couple of different ways to get promoted in the Championship that they always say. You either kind of get it through money and have an unbelievable, world-class squad that's too good for the Championship, a la a Wolves. You either have a really good squad in terms of a Leeds. Leeds had a really good squad last year in the Championship, with the exception of the likes of Calvin Phillips, top players, and they had Nketiah on loan at one stage. Or you kind of have like 13 or 14 really good players, and you hope they don't get injured. And something that maybe a Norwich have done in the past, where they just kept their Premier League team and kind of gone up. And that way, like, if you look at it, Bristol City made 5 subs, but some of the players they had on the bench: Chris Brunt, Chris Martin, Adrian Mariappa. So like, they're bringing on 3 players there who are older, and mightn't necessarily play 60 minutes, but can play 30 minutes, or mightn't necessarily play 90 minutes, they can play 20 minutes. I think that's the difference. So like, squads in the Championship with a lot more depth in terms of might necessarily having 14, 13 unbelievable players that will get them out of the Championship. They're more of a squad. And I think that's what you're seeing in the Championship. So say, for example, Norwich had a depth destroyed with injuries. Only had 7 subs anyway, so they only brought on, I think, 2 at the weekend. They brought on Zimmerman, the centre half, with 10 minutes to go, and they're one of the teams expected to get promoted in the Championship. So that's what's happening there. And I think what will happen in the Premier League is, I think it will be a benefit to City and Liverpool, because look at City, they would have taken off, they would have brought their 5 subs on when they were 4-0 up, 3-0 up with 25 minutes to go, because the game is won, and they would have been able to rest 5 players just because they're winning a game so easy. That's why I'm not too sure about it. Look, the way Liverpool, like what Klopp's saying about Andy Robertson, I think that's a benefit that they get to take Robertson off, because they have the game, well, in their eyes, they would have had a one at 1-0. If they got another goal, they would have taken Robertson off if they had 5 subs. And I think it's a luxury for the top clubs, that it's a luxury that, teams in the bottom, 10, 11 don't have. And I think that's why I'm against it. And like, every game should be played out to the last minute. And I just think with some games, if the top teams are 3-4-0 up, they'll just, bring on 4 or 5 subs. They'll take off the top players to rest them and to have that luxury. And I think that's why I'm against it. I think it is a luxury, and I think it'd be unfair to bring it in halfway through the season. I take what you say about other countries in Europe having more,
and the Champions League and the Europa League as well, obviously.
Yeah, but I think that the thing about in England is, you've the most teams out of any country that play in European competitions. I think Spain are probably one less, but I think that makes a huge difference, because you've better players, you've more money. Liverpool, and the thing about the players, players make a serious amount of money from every competition they're in. They make money from the Carabao Cup, they make money from the FA Cup, the Champions League, and the Premier League. So it's not as if they are getting milked a little bit in terms of the amount of football, and you could argue was their need for the FA Cup or the Carabao Cup. But the players make a heap of money off this as well. And I think it's important not to forget that Jurgen Klopp saying, oh, well, we played Tuesday night in Europe, where I think they made 74 million last year from Champions League games, from getting knocked out at the last 16. So that's an awful amount of money that goes into the new training ground they've got at Kirkby and Liverpool. And I think that's sort of luxuries that other teams don't have. And I think that's why I'm personally against. That'd be my sort of defense.
Yeah. I take your points, to be honest with you, and good points there. My thing with the Liverpool, City, fair enough, that's an extreme example. I completely agree. 4-0, if they were able to bring on 5 subs, you could have been looking at 7 or 8 there. But for Liverpool,
no, it's not to win 7 or 8-0. It's just to have the guys resting.
Yeah, well, that's fair enough as well.
That's a luxury.
But yeah, even with Liverpool at a 1-1 in a game like that, they actually took off Mo Salah, which I was surprised about. But that front 3 and front 4, you can include Jota there now. There's so much of a gulf in class between them and the next subs, and I think that goes along with all the top 6 clubs outside Manchester City. I don't think the squad depth is there. Arsenal wouldn't have made the 5 subs against Wolves, because we know one to bring on. And it's the same.
You might, because you have more players on the bench, and I think Arsenal would have had, because they.
Who they brought on?
Martinelli would have been an extra sub on the bench. That's just ours, for example. But you take that Liverpool team, if you look at how many injuries they have and the team they're still able to produce, especially in the game, was it last week when Milner, when it was Matip, Fabinho, Robertson, Alisson in goal. I mean, it's still an unbelievably good side. And when you have that front 4, I think. Yeah, you can argue that, some of the players coming off the bench, but look what Shaqiri's done off the bench. His pass to Jota for that West Ham game won them the match. It was that pass that they were struggling to open up West Ham in that second half, and his pass did it. And that's, look, my biggest defense is you're not halfway through, but you're nearly a third of the way through the season. And you're doing this. I think it's kind of a push. Look who's pushing it. It's the big clubs. And now I know they've got a lot of managers on board, but it's the big clubs. It's Guardiola, it's Klopp.
Fair. But just on
Frank
the same,
and Jose. Actually, I don't think Jose wants it. I'm not sure.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of injuries. And I think ultimately we do have to be careful. I completely take your point that they're earning a lot of money, but I don't think getting players injured. Now, you can point to a lot of injuries, lack of pre-season, but I do think the small gesture and the fact that, and I understand Premier League is different with top 6 clubs, but Premier League is also different that every club gets an equal vote. And the Premier League isn't the Premier League. It's made up of 20 clubs each year. So it changes every year, which is something they're trying to change in that new not Project Restart, but whatever it was called, Project. I've forgotten it now already, because it's kind of gone out of the news, but
Project Big Picture,
come on. So I just think with the injury side of things, I don't know. It doesn't look great if the Premier League's consistent on the 3 subs. And look, Chris Wilder thing, I don't think he was. Jurgen Klopp was right to have a pop at him, but he does have a point in the sense. It's 1 second. It's 3 subs now, and they are on 1 point. Do you know what I mean? So it's not. Imagine the 5 sub rule was in, the Chris Wilder and the likes will be pointing at the 5 subs. So the fact it's 3 subs now, it hasn't made a big difference. Sheffield United, if anything, it's probably hindered them, the fact they couldn't make 2 more subs.
Yeah, no, I think it got disregarded. I think that Jurgen Klopp interview was a disgrace, to be honest.
Well, just
Like I
we'll
thought
talk
it
about that now.
was.
So I did think I agree with you. I do think Des Kelly. I do think both of them had good points, and it was just a good back and forth. I found it a
No,
good
but
adult conversation, and
Jurgen
I
Klopp
found
has
it.
he has
Go
an
on.
agenda. That's Jurgen Klopp's thing. He has an agenda. He
Mm.
brings this all up. Like Des Kelly asked him a question: Is James Milner injured? Is it a hamstring? He goes, "Yes." You must be delighted. Like Jurgen Klopp has a big agenda. He's pushing this. Liverpool are pushing this. Guardiola does it in his press conference. He pushes it, and I think that's. I think that they really are flexing their muscles, if you like. I thought it was. No, I kind of cringe watching it. It was
I know.
as if
I when I say
it was.
I enjoyed like the two lads went back and forth. Yeah, and I thought Des Kelly made good points and stood up for himself. But I thought where Jurgen was coming from with the 12:30 kickoffs was completely correct. I don't think the way he's gone about it is right.
But
Is
they've
that
been
not
doing that for
fair?
years, Dan. They've been doing that for years.
But not in this
And
congested
this,
fixture list. I guess is where he's coming from.
but you'd be playing Carabao Cup, then you'd have a league, then you'd probably play a Champions League. Like midweek games are normally are. Like I know it's not every single week, and there's breaks between Champions League or whatever, but like
But the
it's just
Champions League was always every second week, so you'd always have a case where you'd have Wednesday,
that's
Saturday
what I'm saying.
morning.
But you could have a Carabao Cup game,
But Carabao Cup games are completely different. It's just a different mindset, and half your team
but you
isn't playing
can't
anyway.
train that day. Like I mean, the players like it's not as if that
But you
Wednesday.
can't equate to the Carabao Cup to Champions League. It's completely different, like,
Mm,
especially when Liverpool are traveling from where was the
but
last game? They're actually at home, weren't they? Or no,
yeah,
they're away. No, they're home. Yeah, but still, I can see.
it was an
I do
agenda.
think. I do. Well, I think there's no like the 12:30 game. They could find a way of it not including one of the big clubs. But I do take the point. Is BT's number one. He's gone about it the wrong way, but I do think he had a point with the 12:30, and it was great
Yeah.
seeing it back and forth for 8 minutes as opposed to an interviewer just sitting there and listening to Jurgen kind of say his stuff. So in that sense, it was good to get to the debate. But I did find myself going after Jurgen went about it the wrong way, but he has some points in where he's coming from, and obviously he's got an agenda. But so does Chris Wilder, and so does every other manager. And I do think Des kind
No,
of
but
standing up.
it's the fact that he just he brings it up. They like that's what I'm saying. Him and Guardiola and the big managers, they're flexing their muscles here. They're saying we are the draw, we make the Premier League money. This is what we want to do. And I think Des Kelly was very good in the fact that he did stand up for himself. But I thought I was sitting there just going like this is bonkers stuff. Like Jurgen has done that a few times this season. Jurgen Klopp. It's almost as if that Villa game has kind of rattled him, and he's been really, really odd since. In some of his press conference and some of the snide remarks, and he's been pushing at this. He did it last week to Jeff Shreves or Patrick Davison, I think it was, and there has been a little bit of push of this. And like to bring up a manager when I heard like him, I'm like, I know I'm a Chris Wilder fan, but to mention a team that's at the bottom, I know they have 1 point, but I just thought it was like you'd never ever see Fergie do that, for example, or Arsene Wenger. You'd never see them pick on someone like that. I know Fergie had his spats with Kevin Keegan and Arsene Wenger, and teams that are at the top, they're fighting for roughly the same position. But I mean, to have a pop at Chris Wilder, and Chris Wilder, in fairness, like he has a few enemies in English football. He had that thing with Norwich where it was, Norwich's bus got delayed to Sheffield United once, and he gave an interview talking about respect and saying you have to be here on time and going to the manager. Like it was, we should clip it or find a link.
I hadn't heard, yeah. But you send me the link straight after this.
Yeah,
so I'm not going to go looking for it. Yeah, go on.
It's brilliant.
I hadn't heard that. Yeah,
but I think he spoke really well about Liverpool in his interview last year after the game on BT. I just thought it was bizarre. And the fact like Chris Wilder's in a rut, and I don't think he needs to know that his team has got 1 point. I just thought it was bizarre, and I think it was as if like it's as if Jurgen's saying like he doesn't have control of his Liverpool side or control of the same control that he had last year, and he's searching for that control. So like it's not that he's under huge amount of pressures, but it's almost as if like there is cracks with the injuries or whatever. But I thought it was bizarre. Yeah, I was a bit uncomfortable listening to it.
Oh, so was I. I was kind of had it on in the background, wasn't listening to it. By the third minute, I was engrossed in it. I do completely agree. I do think the Chris Wilder thing was. I know he went about it. Some of the comments he made weren't good enough, but like you come to expect that from Jurgen in terms of I do think he's not the best loser in the world. I don't think any manager is. And it's almost like Pep's kind of taking a step back the last couple of weeks, that Jurgen kind of fight his fight. But I don't think he'd have gone about it like that if they didn't concede that last minute equalizer either, to be fair. So,
and then I must say, not sure if you saw, but Chris Wilder's interview after the
go on. So what did he say?
Game, like, he was just sort of saying his respect for Liverpool, and of course he's going to stand up for Sheffield United, same way Jurgen Klopp stand up for Liverpool. And Dave Craig, the interviewer for Sky, who Chris Wilder would know a lot from the Championship, covering a lot of Championship games and League One games, tried to get at Chris Wilder, and he kind of refused to comment. I'd say he must have been, furious to be asked that following a 1-0 defeat where, they should have scored 6 or 7 goals. And I think, I'm surprised he didn't come out and have like a soundbite out of it, because I'd say he would have been tempted.
Yeah, so I can't see them changing to 5 subs. I think Owen McDevitt from Second Captains kind of made a good point. I don't think anyone said it. Everyone wants 3 subs. Everyone else wants 5 subs. Is there not a common ground in there somewhere on a number, something like a 4 subs? Kind of a bit of.
No, I think it's going to happen. I think it's going to happen. I think the pressure is too much, and I think, like I say, the big managers, the big clubs, going to flex their muscles, and I think it's going to be like a huge moment, because I think it's going to be the first major shift towards this idea of the big 6 or the big 8, or the stereotypical big clubs in England, and getting the decision they want.
I know. Ordinarily, I'd agree with you. I just think the fact that everyone in Europe is doing the 5 subs, and I take your point, the top 6, and I take your point overall, it should probably favour the bigger clubs. But I don't know if the data's backing that up yet. Like, I don't see. I'm trying to play out games. That Arsenal game, for example, obviously they'd be able to name a fuller squad. Like, it's not just a 5 sub thing. It's also what you get to name your whole squad, or is it 9? It's 9 or 11 subs. I can't remember. But I just don't see. For example, Arsenal are a big 6 club. I didn't see anyone coming on, anyone within outside of Mesut Ozil that would have made a difference in that game, for example. So.
No, but yeah, no, I think they would have, like, they used.
Or in United, for example, so United made the comeback with 3 subs against Southampton. Like, there was no one else that was going to make a massive difference. But if it means they can take Rashford off with a minute to go, okay, that's a bad example because they scored a last minute goal, and it might save him getting an injury.
But I mean,
I think that's fair. I think that's like, we don't want to be flogging players, like, But
I'm sure they get well compensated enough, Mr. Johnny Cash.
Yeah, but again, I still don't think that's right to be kind of have them like that. Albeit, I do take your point. The money. Quick word on nowhere else to go really in the Premier League, because we can get really bogged down in it. Arsenal's performance against Wolves was, I thought, pretty dreadful, to be honest with you.
Yeah, and I think it's, the more you think of it, I think it's the players probably. Look, I know Arteta has to take blame, and he is. I think he is missing a sort of a number 10. And number 8, he tried Willock there. Joe Willock is good. He's probably better suited as a direct runner from midfield, and not someone that's going to link the play and try and beat a deep block. Obviously there's the stuff with Ozil, and I think that's having a huge effect. I think the player, like, some of the comments about players have said about Ozil, look, he's obviously got a bit of power there. He's mates with Xhaka, Mustafi, Kolasinac, Leno, obviously that German connection. And I think what's happening is they are sort of feeling a bit upset about it, and they want him to play, and they want him to, have the opportunity. And I'm sure deep down Arteta probably does want him to play. And I think it's a decision from higher up that's coming, and Arteta maybe has doubled down on it. But it's a worry for Arsenal if you can't put the ball in the back of the net. And like Roy Keane said, I think they'll have enough to stay up. But I'm sure the likes of Slaven Bilic and Chris Wilder will be hoping that, there is a big side that kind of get dragged into a race, because it's, it's kind of spacing out a little bit at the bottom.
Yeah, and you mentioned the pressure Klopp is under. I guess he's kind of thinking he could easily win the league here, but 10 points less and he could finish 5th. You know what I mean? So that's probably where the pressure's coming from him. But a quick word on a couple of those teams in there. The Chelsea Spurs game, you mentioned you watched it back. Sorry, someone should give me the heads up to not bother and just watch the 3-minute highlights. But I think Jose's happy enough for the points, and I thought it's the way he's going about his post-match press conference. Like, I think Spurs are in this for the long haul anyway.
Yeah, 100%. You get all the hallmarks of it, and even some of the signings he's made. I mean, I said I said to one of my friends at the time as a Spurs fan, I thought Højbjerg was a brilliant signing. Like I'd seen him play a lot for Southampton. Like I know he hadn't played a lot post lockdown because they'd kind of gone and given Armstrong more of a game. So they had Romeo and Ward-Prowse there, and obviously the system they have now. But he was really, really good for a while. Obviously coming from pedigree at Bayern Munich, like you don't play there for a good while without having that pedigree, and he's really shored up that midfield because for all I like about Harry Winks, I don't think he suits a Jose Mourinho outfit. For example, he he's not strong enough maybe in the tackle. He doesn't read the play well enough, and Sissoko and Højbjerg, like you think about trying to break them down is going to be a struggle. So I think Jose is in a really good place. Joe Rodon did well at the back. Yeah, I still think they're going to struggle at teams at home to break sides down themselves. I'm really fascinated to see Arsenal Tottenham, because I think Arsenal probably suited to playing bigger teams at the moment in terms of defending and numbers. I think Arsenal probably.
But it's only so far that gets you now when you don't have anything going.
Yeah, but I think Tottenham have struggled. Like look where they dropped points. I mean, they should have dropped points against Brighton. They got a handy penalty. They dropped points to Newcastle, West Ham. Teams that defend in numbers and try and hit you on the break. So I think that'll be obviously probably the game of the weekend next week. But I think there's a lot of teams now that are struggling. I mentioned to Steve Bruce's Newcastle, thought they were brilliant. I kind of expected a reaction. I kind of thought that there would be a lot more attacking. I like the team. I like the four at the back. Extra body in midfield, and they Joe Linton and Wilson up top. They won that without Saint-Maximin, who's out. They've had COVID issues. That midfield three I thought worked with Longstaff, Shelby and Hendrick, and it actually kind of got Hendrick further forward. But they're full value for the win. Top Palace, they're going to be in trouble if they play football like that. I mean, they were brutal. I know.
I agree with you. But I looked at the table; they're like 8 points clear or something.
Yeah,
so
I mean,
but a big cushion there, big cushion.
As Chris Wilder said in his interview, I mean, Bournemouth got off to a great start last year and just found a rut, and I think that's the nature of the Premier League. I mean, look, Fulham, West Brom, Burnley, Sheffield United, they're probably all going to be there. You'd imagine Burnley should have enough. And at the moment, the three favourites are West Brom, Fulham and Sheffield United. But I think, teams can get in a rut. The likes of Brighton, if they can't put the ball in the back of the net, they're going to struggle. But, at the moment, you think they're fine because, like I said, Sheffield United, Fulham have struggled. But I think there's more to come from both those sides. Like I think Scott Parker's done a decent job with what he's got, especially at the back. I know they've struggled, but I think they've adapted well enough at times. And I think, if Sheffield United create that many clear-cut chances, I don't know how they. Honestly, I don't know how they didn't score. It was actually, I felt sorry for Chris Wilder because they created so many chances that they would have worked on because it all comes from the wings and it comes from crosses into the box, and their striker still missed. The one thing I would say about Sheffield United is they've 24 million for Brewster, 18 million for McBurney, another 10 for Mousse. Questions have to be asked about that.
It's 50 plus million there alone.
What are they?
Figures. Yeah.
Brewster was the most bizarre signing of all time. You're
going to call it that early. Yeah.
The fella has potential. Don't get me wrong, but the amount of players that come out of Liverpool and have been duds, and they've got your man. I think Michael Edwards is his name in Liverpool, and he in his transfer, the head of transfers or something, and he just cleans up. Look at Bournemouth.
He's doing very well, isn't he? Yeah.
20 million for Solanke. I think there was another 12 for Jordan Ibe. And to take what they could have got with that. They could have got, a proven goal scorer, someone who's done it even in the championship. Like I said, there's a lot of Ollie Watkinses out there, and I'm sure Chris Wilder will be keeping an eye on that because it's, even someone like Tyler Roberts from Leeds. I'm not sure Sheffield United would have sold him it, but God, 20 million for Brewster.
No, it's hard to
don't get me wrong. The fellow could be good, but he could be good in the championship next year when they're down there. And he did okay for Swansea on loan, and he scored a few goals. And Swansea are a good side, but there's a huge difference. And the fact that he hasn't started, I really worry. I think Ollie Burke is probably their best striker without being a big goal scorer, and I think they just need to get a partner for him.
Last thing, we can't let this go without Cavani, particularly as I, bigged up Cavani when he came. Again, I always picture loads of eye rolls when I brought up in the Premier League predictions. But I do think, and it's a common opinion now, that I think he's exactly what United need in a sense. He's got number 9 there. You've Rashford playing off him, anyone playing off him. You can have Greenwood, Martial when he's back. You've got Bruno Fernandes. You can get Van de Beek in the team there. It seems that no one's talking about Pogba anymore. I think, everyone was kind of half expecting to come back just because of the nature of the Premier League these days with the behind closed doors. But I do think with Cavani up there, I thought he did well in Champions League. Do you remember, was it the last, they were home to Istanbul who were shocking, and Cavani wasn't actually involved in any of the goals, but I did feel his presence up there took away a lot, like created space. And I thought he was unbelievable. And I thought his running, he's straight away, he's different to Falcao. The fact he just starts running a lot more than Falcao, which is it mightn't seem like the most basic thing, but he looks fit. He looks like he's ready to run, and he has scored goals everywhere he's been, as well as not only scored goals. He's one of those players who can score goals, but also hold the ball up and link play and run in behind. He can kind of do a bit of everything. I know he's 32 or 3. I think he's 33.
He's a proper number 9 at that respect. I mean, he can stretch defenses, but he can also attract players to create room behind. And I think it, like you said, it's what United are sort of craving out for. If they can get pace on the wings with Rashford and Greenwood and Martial when he returns, and I think it gives so much more room to Bruno to find those pockets. And I think United could have stumbled on something. I think Van de Beek, I said I think he can play that number 8 role. I know at times he was further forward and he was getting into the box, and maybe he was a little bit wasteful and maybe a bit unselfish. But I think he suits that number 8, especially when you're trying to break a team down. And I think he can kind of turn himself into a good player in there, and someone that can win games for Manchester United. Look, Ollie, all of a sudden 3 wins, I think, in the league, and there's no pressure for Ollie, but I think it's a big couple of weeks now at the Champions League, because they have to play PSG, don't they? They have to play Leipzig, and they need to get positive results out of both those games.
Yeah, and Ollie and Frank all of a sudden do very well. And I do think it was almost like Fred heard Roy Keane at halftime. I thought he was low-key very good second half there as well. United were very, very impressive. But yeah, that's it really for the Premier League. And the podcast we potentially have an exciting interview coming up on Wednesday. Can't say much about it at the moment. And Thursday we're going to come back with our Premier League predictions. And that's pretty tight between Kev and Matt at the moment, Sean. I know there's a correct score or 2 in there as well. So yeah, we've got kind of exciting shows coming up. All that's left to say is, follow us on Tackling Sport, all social media channels. And if you are listening on Apple, we'd really appreciate a 5-star review. And bottom right on YouTube, if you are watching, to subscribe to the show. And all that's left to say is it's goodbye from Sean.
Bye.
And it's goodbye from myself. We'll chat to you during the week. Have a great week.